I was just saying that when it comes to defending my kids, my husband, my community, my family members, even if I don't like you and I thought it was unjust, I could really step in and like kick some ass. But when it comes to myself, the shutdown is so strong, like
Yeah.
almost like want to fall asleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Did, I would ask you what's precipitating that comment, but there's probably like pick one of 20 things that happened in the news this week.
Mhm.
Yeah, right? I think any of us, I saw they shot down a fighter jet
Yeah.
over Iran. I think probably we're being lied to about casualties. I think we're probably being lied to about even maybe deaths. Who knows what the lies are? I don't know.
I mean, I would probably say that like under a different administration, there's such a thing as like operational security. So you don't know because you shouldn't know. But with this president, he doesn't do that. He gets on the news and spouts a bunch of stuff that is obviously false because it's inconsistent with what you said 30 seconds ago. So there's no way either one of them is true, right? Yeah. Yeah. I think what you said before about like, yeah, I could, on behalf of everybody I know, I got no problems, but on behalf of myself, like like I want to say game recognized game, right? That's probably true, right? I think there's something there about like, there's a reason why you can be so passionate about justice, because you know what unjust feels like and looks like and sounds like. And and whatever we have to do to survive that stays with us, and we can simultaneously go, but I won't ever stand by and watch anybody I love feel what I felt and experience. So I get it. Been there, done that. Have the t-shirt, the hoodie, the hat, like the whole thing,
I
Yeah.
think
right?
about this a lot too, just in terms of like, I think part of it is, for me at least, how I've been socialized as a woman is like, as a white woman, is like, you are supposed to be demure and like look out for the betterment of other people. And we can talk about how problematic the people represented in the movie Bombshell are, that it exposes the sexual abuse in Fox News. And one of the things that was so striking is that all of the women said, I didn't want this to happen to another woman, and that's why I spoke up, which is great. And should it not be enough for us to say, I deserve justice for what happened? That's why I'm going to speak up. But it's almost like we need a surrogate that makes it okay to expose harm or violence. And I don't know, but I don't think we come out of the womb like that. I think that's a big part of how we're socialized to always abdicate ourselves on behalf of someone else. And I think that's like a good way we can do that, where it's like, okay, I want to fight for these people, I want to fight for justice. And I have this hope that we can also do that for ourselves one day.
What is that look, Rebecca?
I mean, I like there's so much of that I agree with, and also I'm trying to process it and figure out where would I locate myself in that sort of dynamic of like deference on my own behalf. And I'm trying to figure out if that frame is true for Black women, and then I have a curiosity for you, Danielle. Like, do you think Latino women are required to inhabit that exact same space? Um, yeah, so like all that's racing through my mind as I'm listening to you talk, Jenny. Um, I completely agree with the frame, and I can find spaces where I have been required to step into that exact frame, like particularly in evangelical spaces when you start talking about like headship and submission and all of that. Like there's definitely that you just got to defer, right? I mean, I've even been told like deference to men, period, not and to which my answer was, okay, you are not my husband, so stop talking to me, right? But and even to my husband, it's like, yeah, well, we'll see about that. And I love him to death. I do. Um and if I knew a guy that was worth that kind of deference, he would be it. But I'm just saying. So I have all those things running through my mind as you talk, like how big is the frame? How far does it reach? Where does it run into something that doesn't work in that frame, and what happens in that space?
Can you repeat your frame again, Jenny?
I'm thinking about, especially, or maybe specifically for white women, that there's this socialization of demureness and abdicating any sense of healthy aggression for yourself. And you can justify it if it's on behalf of someone else, but you can't stand up for yourself and say, F you, this is not gonna stand. It's always, I'm going to tell the truth so this doesn't happen to someone else.
Hmm.
Not, I'm going to tell the truth because this happened to me and it's not okay. Like, that is very, very rarely the case if a white woman is pursuing justice in an experience of harm.
And Rebecca, you're saying how does that fit or not fit for Latinx females?
Yeah, that's my question to you, right? Does it
Hmm.
is that what stops L- Latina women from asserting justice on their own behalf? Is it that you've been taught that you're not allowed to ask for it on your own behalf, but you can ask for it from someone else? Or is it something else that would silence you?
Oh man, that feels emotional. I mean, you got like real examples in live time, right?
Right, right. Like
um,
right?
and I just want to say for the record, as soon as it came out, we ripped all the signs down.
That
We
that
took all the
part.
holidays
That
away.
part.
We're not in our churches trying to
That
defend him.
part.
Yeah, let's just say that.
That
Let's just
part.
say that. Like it was gone. Um, damn. I don't know. It's something in me that I saw my mom do that I didn't see my mom have a word. I like if I think about it, and she might listen to this. I don't have an example of a female in my life from that part of my family that stood up for themselves just for themselves. In fact, the example I have is it was crushing. And it wasn't a there I don't we're not demure. Like that is that's not a
That
thing.
part.
Uh,
Neither are we.
so I don't relate to that, and there's this wild juxtaposition though because you think of Latinas as crazy. It's almost the opposite. And my mom, maybe I see women like spinning out in the face of white men, like spinning out, but that the deadlock silence in response to them for themselves is unmovable in my experience. This is from white folks to Latina, I would say. I would say within our own culture, like standing up for other people, I think because we also stand up for men and other like all folks, we get a pass to do that. Like if we're standing up for someone else, people are like, okay, that's okay. Like you might be a little wild or you might have said something I don't like, but you are doing the right thing. But if it's just for yourself, it's not enough. That's my broad response. What about you, Rebecca, for you guys?
I mean, I think it's really similar, and in the end, we might actually be back in Jenny's frame with some slight nuance, but I do think like I do think that it's more than just a pass for Black women to speak up for everyone, other people. There is an expectation and a requirement that we do so, right? And if we don't, well, where are you, right? Hence the whole Black women sort of sitting this one out since the last election and all of the backlash about where are you and why are you not out here, right? Um, so I do think as Black women, like we feel the weight of the expectation that we are at the forefront of speaking up when injustice is present. Um, I think that's both internal and external. I think we feel it that way. Um, and, and what might be a slight nuance, and I'm going back to something you said a week or two ago, Danielle, like if you were looking at let's just say, we're talking now about, some type of harassment of women or sexual violence towards a woman. Um, would you even feel that as an individual thing, or would you feel it as a collective thing? Would your body interpret it as this happened to me, or would you feel it like this is happening to us,
If
right?
if it happened to me, I would say it's I'm alone. If it
Yeah.
happened to you or or a friend, another
Yeah.
Latina, I would say it's us.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's very much in line with how we're socialized.
Yeah, I think Jenny, you may be right in the end because even to whatever extent I would say on my own behalf, okay, we're not doing this, right? So there's going to be some part of that is because if you do it to me, you'll do it to the next person, right? If this happens to me, it's going to happen to the next Black woman that sits in this seat, and I'm not going to be, we're not doing that, right? So you can still see that sense of having to pull in the sort of collective narrative in order to feel permission to push back as hard as you might need to. So there might be some nuances, but in the end, the basic premise might hold across a lot of different cultures.
Mhm. Mhm. It makes me think about Patricia Hill Collins saying, like, in the US, the assumption that racism and sexism are two different entities is a misconception. Like, they each rely on each other. Because I'm thinking, I'm also not demure. Like, there is home videos of me as a 3-year-old jumping on my brother's neck like a spider monkey and like beating them with swords. Like, I've always been like pretty aggressive as a natural being. And I think white womanhood is the constraint of demureness. And I think that's also how white women and women of color get pitted against each other because it's the angry black woman or the crazy Latinx woman. And you don't want to be one of those. You want to be the good white woman. And so it actually keeps solidarity from happening because of the way in which race and gender fractal us in different spaces or fracture us, I think. From like, we're just actually human bodies that are hopefully going to have a natural response to harm, but we've been so socialized out and disjointed from how we respond to that harm.
I mean, it's a
Hmm.
good question. In
Yeah.
some ways, your question is what is femininity? And is femininity like sort of monolithic and homogeneous in its, is it one thing? Is femininity just demureness and nothing else? Um, and I'm gonna say like it's way more complex and nuanced than any one of those tropes allows for, right? Like you have to be both demure. I can't even say the word. It's that so like the concept so far, and also uh like fierce. And it's the dance between the two extremes and everything in between and how you do that dance, right? But mostly we're constantly dealing with this sort of flat, one-dimensional trope that requires us to show up only one way, and then villainizes if you step out of whatever whatever trope you've been told that you're allowed to inhabit,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? Like D.L. Hughley, this comedian, this black comedian, said a long time ago, the most dangerous place for a black person to be is in the imagination of a white person's mind,
Yes.
right? And so what I'm suggesting is that mostly these tropes are imagined by the other, right, as a way to other you. Uh, and so there's a lot of danger in the idea that to say to a person you're not demure or you're too angry or you're too crazy is to say you don't fit what my imagination says you're allowed to be.
Mm, mm.
So then here's my question.
And I'll jump in
I
after
don't,
this.
do you want to go first?
No, no, you go.
I'm thinking how I don't think most white women know it's a trope. And
Yeah.
so, obviously, not that you could speak for all Black women or all Latinx women, but is there some awareness that it is a trope?
Oh, times a thousand,
Oh, yeah.
right? And the distinction I would say is this: if you're of the majority culture, and therefore your sort of cultural narrative is not only centered, but it is the standard by which everything else gets measured. You have no idea. You can't imagine that there's something else um besides what besides the frame that you have, right? It's sort of the matrix problem in that you have no idea there's a red pill and like you have no idea you're actually stuck in it because it's all that you know. The distinction I think when you are come from a marginalized space is that you are aware of both the center and the margins. And you are aware that there are very well defined and complex rules about how you move in between those two spaces, and who's allowed to move, like all of that, because you have to know it in order to survive. So have I told my daughter like all the things about the angry black woman trope
Mhm,
and how she's supposed to navigate that? Absolutely,
mhm,
all the time. Like it's at the forefront of a thousand decisions I make about her and myself all the
mhm,
time,
mhm,
all the time. Right. And I raised her like, I need you to know that this is out there. I need you to pay attention to the fact that this is the expectation. And we need to talk about what you're going to do in reaction to that expectation.
Mhm.
Right. She was probably middle school. And she got an invitation to go to church with this family that we knew was very wealthy, white, super wealthy, um, and wealthy in a way that they moved in circles we don't move in,
mhm,
right? And they lived in a neighborhood that had a country club in it, right? And their tradition as a family was to go to church and then after church go to brunch at the little country club, right?
mhm,
So she's getting ready for church and I'm on her like white on rice about what she's getting ready to wear. Right. And she's just a middle school kid who's like, I don't do, I'm trying, what color sweats is my only question. Like, why are you right? But all I could think about is you're gonna be in this country club and I need you to pay attention to what the expectation will be when you walk through that door.
mhm,
Right? So I made her, much over her objection, put on something that was appropriate for that environment, right? She got back home at the end of the day with the sort of, I'm so glad you told me
mhm,
to wear what you told me to wear, right? So Yes, the answer to your question is yes and yes and yes. There's not only an awareness, there is an intentional sort of education that happens around, I need you to know that's what you're up against, and we need to talk about what you're gonna do about it.
Mm.
Right. And for me, there's this really fine line of like, I want to protect you from what happens if you step outside of the trope you're allowed to navigate. But also, I don't want to crush you either. I don't want to break your spirit in trying to force you to fit into something to protect you from the harm. That's a super fine line for me. And so there's one time when she got sent home from preschool because she kicked a little boy. And she had these pink patent leather boots, like 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 Timberland boots. There were some Walmart knockoffs, but you get the point. And she kicked this little boy. And they made me come get her from school. And I'm like, tell me what happened. And she's like, well, he was in my personal space and I told him to move back and he didn't. So I said it again, he didn't, so I kicked him. Right. And you in the car try not to laugh and high five her because you're supposed to be all like you can't kick people at school, right? But for me, that moment was about like, how do I, like part of me wants to cheer her on for her fierceness, right? It feels to me, Jenny, like you on your brother's back. You know what I mean? Um, and at the same time, how do I tell her how to keep herself safe in an environment that will not perceive her actions as appropriate? And she was the one that got sent home.
Yeah, it's like I mean, I don't know if I sent this to you, Rebecca, but over the weekend we had a man harassing our family, and he's hyper focused on me. And as I went in the house, I said, I can't talk to you. I went in my house really nicely, and we have a blink camera, whatever that is. We have a ring,
Hmm.
so like
Hmm.
whatever that camera is, so you can see me say it. And I go in, and off camera you can hear him just cussing me out, like he's picking it up. My girls go out to take out the dogs, and then he starts threatening them to get me to come out of the house. And if you could, we looked at the video. They're scared, but if you could see Estella's face, she leans back and just gives him this like, "Don't fuck with me" look. Like, comes in the house, and they're scared, they're shaking, but she wrote out her statement, and there was other things that happened, but the next day she went out into the backyard and caught him like crouching behind the fence looking at them,
Hmm.
and whipped out her phone and was like, like had this like different capacity to take a video than I think what do we do with that kind of spirit, um and how do we cultivate that to be able to defend themselves, so we don't keep passing on this trauma to our kids. I'd like to think that's what somehow is getting transmuted, but I don't know. But also then the rest of the week was just like no energy, like you could tell like it took everything out of everybody. And I just, when Luis, tried to calm this person down, the hyper focus was on me. Like somehow the ownership to talk to me, somehow the demand and the right, even to my husband, like superseded it, just the I feel like it's a metaphor for this moment, just the demand from people of color to get out here and somehow fix this problem that 71% of white people voted for this. Like, you can run the detailed numbers on black men
Yeah.
and black women, it's 8%, whatever. And, Latino women, I think it was like 20% voted for Trump. You can run all the numbers, but we're not the ones that made this happen in the end. We contributed, but there's 71% of white people that made this happen. They made fucking sure it was going to happen to us. And I just feel like all of that just exacerbates this thing we're talking about, both for our kids and for us. And what do you know, like, I love how you parent your kids, Rebecca, and like, how do we parent our kids in this moment? Or how do we, and not just our kids, but like our friends, like steward our
Mhm.
relationships so we can stand up for ourselves, you know? I don't know.
I mean, I think um but in like and even back to Jenny's question about, her sense of there's maybe not an awareness of this dynamics if you're white. I mean, and hence that is what all this stuff is about like teaching American history is critical race theory, and we're not going to do it, and we're going to strip from history all of this stuff on the logic that it makes white children uncomfortable, right? Which is this intentional move to keep people in this state of unawareness and lack of knowledge and lack of information and lack of context, right? And as opposed to what I did with my kids and what you probably did with your kids, which is let me fill in the gaps and give you the data I know you're not getting in school. Let me make sure that you get it in all kinds of different places so that you are prepared. And so I think, to your point, Jenny, some of the lack of awareness is intentional concealment and has been intentional concealment for hundreds of years, so that you literally have people who do not know what they do not know and cannot fathom or even conceive of the reality that there are things that you don't know and understand. There are other ways to look at it, right? There's a lack of curiosity about it, a lack of even sort of understanding that there may be another way to think something through. And it just you remember that story broke a few years back about the celebrities that got caught like taking SATs and stuff like that for their kids to get into college. So I was listening to some news report, and they were interviewing these two kids. Their parents were a celebrity, and they were interviewing the two kids about the fact that the parents got caught and they were getting prosecuted by the law. And the kids were like, we had no idea that was happening. All we knew is that we went to go take a test, we got some scores back, and we got into the school that we got into, and we believed that we deserved to be there. Right. And I thought to myself, and that is how this thing gets cemented generationally, systemically, is that it was actually concealed from those kids that their parents cheated and lied and schemed and broke a bunch of laws to gain them access to something they didn't actually earn. And they don't actually know that because it was kept from them. And so they honestly think they are where they're supposed to be. And when they look at someone else who didn't get in, this is where you're gonna hear, well, I pulled myself up by my own bootstraps. Actually, you didn't, but you don't know that
That part.
because right?
Say
Because
that
it was
again.
kept, right? Right? Actually, you didn't, but you don't know that, right?
Actually,
So
you
I
didn't come
say
from
that not as
nothing.
a what you say?
You didn't come from nothing.
Right? I mean, and I say that not, like because I think people should get a pass, but there is this intentional move and it's purposeful to conceal what's actually happening.
Hmm.
It makes me think of Simone de Beauvoir was a feminist thinker from France, and she said it is always more comfortable to endure blind bondage than to work for one's liberation. And I think that is such the bind for white privileged bodies is that we are constrained and in bondage by these systems, and yet it is the privilege of blind bondage because of the power that we assume ourselves to have because of the privileges that are real, so long as we perform what we need to perform as white or female or all of these things.
I also think that I read an article a few years back, and I can't remember the author, so forgive me for that. Just know that I'm not taking credit for this idea, but it's written by this psychologist who studied the Holocaust and built a theory around how collective identity is formed, right? And the article talks about like the collective identity of the marginalized people, and also the collective identity of the 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 group of people that are in power, and are the source of marginalization itself, right? And so, um, what he talks about is when you have to come face to face with your own capacity to harm another culture, that you are part of a collective culture that harmed another culture in the way that the Germans harmed the Jews, right? What do you have to do psychologically? This is Danielle's theory, right? What do you have to do psychologically to actually survive that reality? Right. And he suggests a number of things. But what made me think of it in this case is like the ways in which you have to be dismissive or outright deny all kinds of historical fact and information in order to dissipate the dissonance you feel about the fact that you belong to this group that was capable of the level of harm it was capable of.
Mm.
Eh, Right. And so is that blind that you're speaking of, Jenny, right? There are parts of it that are intentional, right? From the system concealing it, but to what extent do we have to ask the question of like, and what's the individual role in sort of perpetuating that blindness?
Yeah. It's kind of like the question has recently shifted. Not that I think it's not an important question of did I pull myself up by my bootstraps or not, but the question that I've been thinking of is who is the invisibilized labor that made those bootstraps in the first place?
Mm,
Because I
mm,
didn't make them. And if
mm,
I have bootstraps to even pull myself up from,
mm,
who are the people, the cultures, the countries that have been extracted from for the resources and the
mm.
labor to make those bootstraps in the first place?
I got a quote for you. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Power structures like you're talking about like this are like reproductive organisms. Labs full of rats for repeated experiments to ensure the same consistent outcome. In institutions they decide whose knowledge is legitimate. So I think whatever you're talking about, it's kind of like its own like pregnant baby having multiple babies over and over, and now they've figured out how to mass produce these fucking bootstraps that white people are hanging on to, yeah, maybe you didn't create it, but someone close to you or even me, like, you know uh had that baby and we hung on to it. It got reimagined as time. Who said that thing about imagination, Rebecca or Jenny?
That was me, dear,
Oh,
quoting D.L. Hughley.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Then it came back. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
And like it's one of those things. It's like what will it take? And I'm guilty in this, right? Like it's easy for me to say, why did white people still drink coffee and have sugar during slavery? As I talk to you on a computer that was built by child slave labor in Congo extracting cobalt. And like how do I sit with the implications that the clothes I'm wearing, the technology I use, it is not separate from ongoing everyday extraction and harm across the globe. But because of how imperialism works, not to say it's not present in the US, but it's far more present if you go to the global south and the places that those materials and labor are centered in this current moment. And so, what will it take as a collective for us to say, we are no longer going to live with the conveniences of life so long as it is built on the harm of other people. And I don't know. I'm asking myself this question. Like, what do I do? Just go lay in the street and die? Because that's the only way to not be complicit. And that wouldn't change the system. So,
I, I'm not sure that trying to put yourself in a position where you are not complicit is the is is a helpful response. Um, in part because I think it's impossible, right? Like it's in the air, it's in the water, it's in the drywall, it's in the two by fours that frame the walls. Like you can't actually um put yourself in a situation where you are not somehow, I mean, and I need to say we, like we are not somehow um benefiting from the system in some way, shape, or form. I think that for me, part of what feels like a helpful response is one, is really this one thing, which is not to in an attempt to give up whatever power or privilege that you have, but to actually figure out how do I leverage that privilege and that power on behalf of something just. Because you like I don't actually think when power is bestowed upon us from a system that placed us in the hierarchy within the system and granted us the power that's connected to whatever that placement is, I don't think we can actually forfeit that power. And I think it's a mistake to think that we can. I think the question becomes, how do you leverage it towards something that's just as opposed to leveraging it to perpetuate the injustice? So, so, um, I mean,
Yeah.
again, there's this comedian, I think it's Michael Che, but I'm not sure, black male comedian who has this whole routine about the power of white women and why he thinks they could change the world. Right. And in part, I mean, it's a whole comedy routine, so it's supposed to be funny, but in part, you know, he talks about that that situation a few years back when there was a black man bird watching in Central Park and this white woman came upon him and then she, you know, she called the police. But he's basically just talking about like the power that the system has bestowed upon white women and what happens if they actually leverage it towards something good, right? So I would love to see the Christy Gnomes and the Pam Bondis of the world actually leverage their power towards something that looked like justice instead of using what power they had, however fleeting, to entrench injustice into the system, which is what they did.
That's like it reminds me of The Handmaid's Tale. I don't know if you guys have watched it, but Serena Joy is essential to the movement. She's like really, because these guys are kind of, I don't want to say a bad word again. I said a lot of bad words already, so I'll refrain from that. But you know, and and she's like the brains behind it. And so you see that with these trad wives. You see, Erica Kirk. I mean, I don't know that she's got a lot of brains, but she's very savvy with her use of her position and power, and she's good at following a script. So I mean, like, you know, and now, yeah, that who knows who actually killed Charlie? By the way, like, um, but yeah. So I just, yeah, I think you're right, and I think these white women actually pull a lot of the strings, and hold a lot of the power. Yeah.
And even if they don't, because to some degree, I think you can make this valid argument that the Pam Bondis and the Christy Gnomes were propped up to be the face of something.
Yeah.
Um, and in some ways they didn't have the power that of the perception that matched the perception of who they were, right? So you I think they're less empowered. Um, there's definitely people behind them pulling the strings, and yet you have a crap ton of power because you have the bully pulpit, right? And what would have happened if you had actually used that bully pulpit? What would happen if you linked arms and joined forces with all these other women and together collectively you used the power of the smaller pulpits you had?
Jenny?
Yeah, I feel like it's such a complicated place because I do think that power comes in proximity to white men. And what we're seeing this week with Pam Bondi, and it's like as soon as you aren't giving white men what they want, then you're disposable. And so if the question is how do you leverage power, it feels like it has to be kind of sneaky and subtle because if
Absolutely.
it's very overt, then you're immediately going to be cast aside.
Absolutely. And women of color know that space really well,
Oh, yeah, we can lose in a nanosecond.
right? But we
Yeah,
also know how to be covert with it,
yeah.
right? And I'm looking at, I mean, as a lawyer, as a fellow lawyer, I'm looking at Pam Bondi going like, your legal career is screwed because you sold your soul for temporary power. And we could have told you it was temporary. Hell, Michelle Obama told you it was temporary back during the campaign, right? Like, like everybody around this man is temporary, right? Everybody's expendable.
He
Nobody has a shelf life past like 6 months,
No, he made money saying you're fired. I mean, come on.
right?
I won't say another bad word.
But I think what I think is so important about that is when you say, we know how to be sneaky, it's because there's an access to an interiority. And it's like what we've been talking about. I think a lot of white women don't even have access to that interiority because they don't even know that they're performing white womanhood. There's no space or relation to a self. And that I think is the work of how do we develop a soul or bring a soul back to a body that from the time she was 9 years old was being conditioned to live outside of herself to perform white womanhood and didn't have a parent saying, hey, this is what you're doing. This is how you're going to be sneaky. This is how you're going to blend in the country club as much as you can. There was none of that. You guys need to develop a course to like teach white people how to have a self.
Nah, that's what you're over there for. That is not our assignment.
I'm trying. I'm working on it.
Whoever that lady is they interviewed after the No Kings protest, and the guy asked her, and she said, "Oh no, black people, get her. She'll teach the
Yes.
class for you." Right?
Well, the problem is, I mean, in the end, white women are we're assuming they don't have a choice. All of us have a choice. Like at some level, our choices are different and are limited by our circumstance, both by our socio-political positionality in the country, by the amount of power we've been endowed, maybe through our parents or through the system, like you're saying, Rebecca.
Yeah.
In the end, I still have choices. Like, even if it costs me a great amount, I there's times when I've made those choices. I'm not perfect, but there are times when I made those choices and I've lost. I've lost a lot. So the will, like the incapacity for. I saw this great comedian. I'll just give you an example. I almost sent it to you guys from Facebook. I can't remember his name. He's like, he's like, Mexican kids really know what it means to go to the bathroom. in a public space. Like if they get dragged into the bathroom, they know they're in trouble, right?
Right.
And he said like he sees this like white kid at the store like going, "I hate you, mom." And he's like he tells his mom, "I would never do that, mom."
Right. Right.
I think that's so funny, but I think that also like speaks to the character of the way we're raising our kids, or just the it's not just a threat, but it's also like there's some like deep respect here. Like there's something
Yeah.
again. I don't really have the answer, Jenny. I'm just kind of telling you things I think about and know, and I do think like despite the lack of choice, there is choice.
I mean, one thing I would say is that one of the things that's true for marginalized people, I think, and it's certainly true in the Black community, is that a lot of times what we're fighting for is the right to tell our own story. Right. And by virtue of the fact that we are telling it, it is a truer version of the story than if the powers that be is allowed to shape the narrative, right? And so I think that part of what has happened around whiteness and white femininity is that there's actually a history, however small or large it is, of like resistance. It's there.
Mhm.
There are the Susan B. Anthony's, there are the Joan of Arc, there are right. I mean, there are the Ruth Bader Ginsburg, like they're there, right? But and I think part of what has to happen is those stories need to be told and normalized and entrenched in a way that that they create this kind of on-ramp or access point. Right? That whole Say Her Name campaign around Breonna Taylor and Sandra Bland was this idea that Black women were losing their lives at the hands of a racist system. And if we didn't say their names, if we didn't tell their story, they would disappear from the landscape. And so I think the path is there. It's been buried and it might be narrow, but it is there. And you got to figure out a way to tell that story in a way that allows people to access it. And I don't even know it. I told you like the two or three names that I was allowed to learn in school. Susan B. Anthony and right. They're not. I can't hardly give you no more names than that.
Mhm.
Right. And that's an acknowledgement that the system intentionally removed their stories from the landscape.
Yep.
Right. I would argue that's a Hillary Clinton.
Jenny, what are you thinking?
I was actually thinking about years ago I watched the movie Rosewood, and it's about Rosewood. And there's a scene in it where this guy is trying to break into this white woman's house, and she just asks, "Are you really gonna push through a white woman?" or something like that. And she just knows, like, he's not gonna do that. And it was like a really powerful scene of like a white woman holding and leveraging her power. Um, I'm wondering with the resurgence of, or maybe just the exposing of misogyny with Trump and like the overt sexism that has been on the political stage since 2016, what does that power look like? How has it shifted? Like, even optically, like, do white women bear that same level of power now that there's some I don't know, just the rape language and the way in which like women are so dehumanized by Trump and his cabinet. Like I don't know. It's this weird, it's a weird place. Like white womanhood is such a crazy making place inherently because there is so much power and there's not, and they both exist at the same time. And so I think that's where it like sends me spinning because both are true.
The problem is that at this particular moment, the people taking up all the oxygen in the room are the Christy Gnomes, the Pam Bondis, and the Erica Kirks. And that demonstration of power is to placate and to bolster and to buttress the misogynistic narrative that, and we're way past boys will be boys now. We're fully in the land of, and so freaking what? It doesn't matter. Right? When you have a white woman in the seat as Attorney General defending the Epstein files and doing it blatantly on national TV in the face of the victims who are less than 10 feet from her, and nobody batted an eye.
And that still wasn't enough to keep her in power.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And the narrative around why she's getting fired is because she didn't play that role hard enough. Right. And then you have Drewski with that skit about Erica Kirk or just white female power in this moment, and she sued him. Right? I mean, like, so in some ways, this moment, like what's coming into focus is actually the use of white women and white femininity to bolster and buttress this new sort of blatant level of misogyny. Right? It is an insistence that this is the only way you're allowed to show up in the room. And if you show up and if you show up any differently, you'll be removed from the room.
Mm.
And I don't hear sort of this collective pushback of like, nah, that's not who we are.
Mm.
It makes me think about something that's been giving me life these last few months is that we are in Pensacola, Florida, and Sean, my husband, did last year and this year the campaign video for Gay Valamont, and she's running for Matt Gates's old seat. Last year, she lost to Jimmy Petronas, who doesn't even live in this district. He just got an endorsement from Trump. It's been the reddest district in Florida. That's why he won. But she moved it like 22 points and was so close last year and is running again this year. And so I've been the unofficial zhuzher, like making sure her hair and makeup is okay for the shoots and stuff, and just spent a lot of time with her and just have seen like a fraction of the shit she deals with, just like at a restaurant, like people saying comments and stuff. But she like is one of the feistiest, funniest women and is just like, I'm not taking shit from anybody. Like I believe in representation and standing for my community. And I'm just like, yes, we need more women that are willing to be so strong. And I know that they're there. And so my hope is that like people like Gay will just continue to pop up in all of these places. Like if she can run in the reddest district in Florida and have any type of a chance, what does that say for other places in this country that we can start to use and leverage that power in a really important way?
Hmm. We have to pause there, guys. I have a client coming, but this was an amazing conversation.
This is really great.
And we should
Love you both.
definitely record these. We should. Well, I'm recording them. We should definitely just transcript them out and make a book out of them.
I'm here for it.
Come on, Rebecca.
I need some non-disclosure agreements first.
Okay.
See you guys later. Bye.
Bye.